Hey everyone, welcome to today's episode of the VertiMax VIVE podcast. I'm Al Merez. I'll be your host today. Really appreciate everybody for tuning in. Excited to talk about today's topic, really, the topic of education. It's been a big focus of ours here at VertiMax over the past few years. We've invested a lot of time and money into creating our education platforms. You've probably seen that we rolled out an in-person certification program. Recently, we launched our virtual training course, and then of course we have our app, and they're all useful pieces and platforms, and all have their own unique little reason that you should be attending them or watching them. And we're going to dive into some of that today. And we still get a bunch of questions around the education, so we felt like it made a lot of sense to bring on today's guest and really try to get some answers for you. So we're going to tackle just some general training and education questions, around the importance of continuing education, why you should learn from outside organizations, that might be something you're really used to, but look at other places, and then continuing to sharpen your sword, as they say. And then, we're going to dive into some very specific VertiMax questions, like what's the difference between the in-person VertiMax certification and then the virtual? Who should take these classes? And then, what class would be best for me, whether I'm a parent or a basketball coach or trainer. So we decided to bring Chris Gorres in today to help us. He's one of our master trainers. One of our top master trainers, and he's going to answer a bunch of these questions for us. So if you've been following us for a while, I'm sure you've heard Chris either talk somewhere, saw him in a video, or possibly even attended one of his presentations. So he's a big part of our team. We value what he brings to us and to others. So we're just really happy that he joined us today. So Chris, welcome to the podcast, man.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. I always enjoy being able to do things with Team VertiMax.
I really appreciate it, buddy. As always, everybody that's listening, jump in with any questions that you have. We'll do our best to get them answered. Put them in the comment section below in the video. Whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, or anywhere else, we'll try to bring them into wherever we can into the conversation. So, Chris, let's start off. For the 1 or 2% of our listeners that may not know you, give us a quick background of your journey to becoming, one of the top strength and conditioning coaches, buddy.
Yeah, so I've been in the industry for about 15 years now, but strength and conditioning has always been a major part of my life. I played football, basketball, ran track in high school, and then went on to play football at Cornell University. So it's always just kind of been a lifestyle for me. And as a 155-pound freshman, I was not the guy that was going to be on the record boards of squat, clean, bench press in the college weight room, right? That's just not in the cards for me. But I could play football. I could run routes. I was fast. And so, I was always passionate about finding ways to train that was really going to help me translate to the field, because that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be the guy on the field. I didn't necessarily want to be the guy whose name was on the weight room record boards, but never got to see the field, So I've always looked at different ways to train. I've always looked at smarter ways to train. And some of that still includes the traditional squat, bench, and all that other stuff. But we're really putting that all together into a program that can fit all different types of athletes and all different types of sports. So that was kind of my journey. And again, I started as a regular personal trainer, just sunk my teeth into selling memberships and helping people lose weight and helping people fix bad knees and bad backs. And that turned into learning more about ACL rehab and Achilles rehab and spondylolisthesis and all kinds of different things. So as I started to get more and more clientele, that was really the driver for my education in the beginning was, hey, if somebody's going to come to me and trust me with dealing with whatever that they're dealing with, I better know as much as I can to know about that field.
That's awesome. It's always interesting to hear everybody's story. Some some know right away that, they may have been an athlete in the past or maybe not. And they just really want to get into the field of exercise science and helping athletes, have a longer career or rehab or come back from injury. And then some were just athletes. We talked to a lot of people that were athletes and then just, got the bug when they were training and playing, and then they realized that's something they wanted to do.
Right.
So, so we're going to talk about education, and the various places that you can get education. Obviously keeping in mind that in this day and age, there's a lot of education floating around there. There's a lot of videos out there, which may be good, may be bad, depending on where you're at. But just kind of walk us through, everybody knows the why they should continue to learn and continue to educate, work on their craft. But what are some organizations or some places that you would recommend somebody going out and just kind of trying to learn more about getting into this space?
Yeah, so I started when I really wanted to get into it. I started with a thing called NSPA, which is the National Strength Professionals Association, just to kind of dip my toe into it. It was run by a guy named John Philbin, who has a place over here in Maryland where I used to live. And I think he was a strength and conditioning coach for Washington Nationals, amongst other different roles that he's had over the University of Maryland. So after I dipped my toe into that, it was like, yeah, this is what I want to do. I feel like I can make an impact in this. I feel like I can be good at this. I feel like I understand the science and I understand a couple of different perspectives of being an athlete, being a coach, being a parent. I understand all of those different things. So that got me into it. And then when I really wanted to pursue it, then I started taking a look at the National Academy of Sports Medicine and some of their certifications for personal trainers. And that helped a lot, just getting an understanding of the physiological side of things, the anatomy, how muscles work, how joints work, what's supposed to happen with movement, what's not supposed to happen. And that's a very good basic understanding. And then took that to the next level when I started to learn from groups like Mike Boyle Strength and Conditioning up in Boston, and the guys from Parisi, and then the guys from EXO, who back when I did it, they were still called Athletes Performance. And then, now it's a really cool thing for me because I get to call these guys my friends. So my continuing education is almost like on a weekly basis, because I can call some of these guys and say, hey, how do you deal with this? Or they'll call me and say, how do you deal with this? So yeah, one of my favorites is Scott Moody out in Overland Park, Kansas. And I think you and I actually went out to Overland Park, Kansas all the time to do some Raptor stuff with VIL. But that's a guy that just dives so deep into the science, and it's cool because he loves the science part, and then I take that and bring that back into the real world and show how we can implement it. And so Scott Moody is another person that I really like. His group is called Athlete Fit. So those are some of the people that I've learned from. And then, of course, recently just being introduced to the VertiMax Master Trainer team. I mean, that team alone, I mean, you've got some people in there that, I love surrounding myself with, just to watch them, what they're doing, and to see kind of the way that they approach different things, or see the way that they interpret different things. Even last week I was down in Tampa and I caught up with Yo. So it's a fun thing. Like whenever we're in town, whenever we're in somebody else's neighborhood, we're always trying to catch up with each other. So the VertiMax Master Trainer team for sure is another one. And I'm not just saying that because I'm on the show. Literally, if I'm dealing with something and a question comes up, I can call a Yo Murphy, or I can call a Steve Leo, or whoever.
It's awesome. No, it's really cool how that all came together and how you how that fit. Hey, one of the downfalls of doing this kind of stuff from home is somebody just started ringing my doorbell. So I'm gonna put myself on mute for 2 minutes while I go figure out what's going on, so they don't keep running it. Do a quick summary. You mentioned our VertiMax Master Trainers. Kind of name them, where they're at, just so everybody kind of knows if they're in the area and they want to reach out for some of the educational tips. And I'll be right back, Chris. Sorry, buddy.
Yeah, cool. So VertiMax Master Trainer team. Again, Yo Murphy, who is expanding down in the Tampa region and South Florida region. Even I think there's some things coming up with Yo that is really exciting in the very, very near future. And Yo does a great job with the NFL Combine training, with off-season MLB training. So he's a guy that works with all different types of athletes. And whenever I have somebody who's in that area that needs a good trainer, I'm definitely sending them to Yo. Will Hitzelberger is also in Florida, in Orlando. He runs a group called Spectrum Performance. Again, somebody that's worked with some very, very high-level athletes, including the Jamaican women's national team, and went to the World Cup with them in Paris a couple of years ago. So that's a guy that is super passionate about his job, super passionate about doing things the right way. Up in New York, you've got Steve Leo and Vinny Scolo. Vinny's just a guy that has so much energy and so much passion in what he does. Steve is a mastermind. If you want to learn more about speed development and getting your athletes faster, that's a guy to do it. And when you go down to Texas, you've got Carrie Bennett. So Carrie is a guy that played at the highest level, was an NFL football player. I think he was with the Washington Redskins, now the Washington football team. And he's turned that energy and that expertise and that passion of being the best athlete that he could be, he's turned that into being one of the best coaches that he can be. And her latest addition, and who's going to be coming on very, very soon and start running her own programs up in Chicago, is M. Hutchins. So really, really excited to have her on. I think that was something that, not by anybody's fault, but one of the things that we looked around when we were in that initial master trainer room was like, man, we need some women up in here. So it was really, really great for us to find somebody who was passionate about what we do, who had the expertise and the chops to be able to stand in front of people and present. But I think the real special ingredient that makes our team unique is the humility that everybody brings. Like, nobody comes in and says, hey, I'm the smartest guy in the room, I'm the smartest woman in the room. So to have M on is really exciting for us.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, and goes right hand in hand with education, is that you may train a certain way and feel like this is the best way for me to train, but you're always learning. You're always looking at other people and how they do it, finding those little pieces of what they're doing that might fit into what you're doing. And that's why we brought the team of master trainers together, because you all have your strengths. You all do things a little bit different. And you're always learning, and you're not trying to shove your method down, anybody else.
Perfect example, before I forget him, because I know he's going to give me a hard time if I do, is Ted Butler from Kentucky. Ted brings so much different energy and different perspective to the things that he does. And Ted is like, I don't know, he's like the MacGyver of training, right? Like, he's always finding different ways to do it. And if he doesn't have like a piece of equipment that he doesn't think is perfect, he's going to find a way to make it or construct it, right? So he's always coming up with different things. And Ted is a guy that I enjoy, because he is the guy that will call me or shoot me a video or something and be like, hey, what do you think of this?
Mm-hmm.
And it's humbling on two parts. One, because he's excellent at what he does. He doesn't need my opinion. But two, he values it enough to say, hey, look, like, I want to know what you think, because I want you to make me better. So the fact that somebody that's as good as Ted thinks that I can make him better is a really cool thing.
Yeah, no question. Definitely a awesome team, and Ted is not afraid to think outside of the box and try something. And his clientele is from the elite NBA athletes all the way down to youth athletes just getting started and everywhere in between. So it's great to have those guys around.
Yeah, and I think like with the education team that you take a look at, when you take a look at, especially with the VertiMax Master Trainer team, all of us work with everybody, right? I don't think that you'll see anybody on a Master Trainer team that says, no, I only work with pro athletes or a specific type of athletes. We work with all athletes, all levels, all sports, and people who aren't athletes at all. And that's because we're passionate about what we do. And when you're working with that vast of a group, education is so important, because if you don't know what's in front of you, if you don't know what you're dealing with, if you confine yourself into a box and say, I'm just a kettlebell trainer, or I'm just a VertiMax trainer, or I only train football players, like, one, as a business, you're going to run out of clientele really quickly. And two, if you don't take the time to learn about other different methods of training, then the next person that walks in the door may want to train with you, and you may not be able to help them.
Yeah, that's good, man. So those people that are out there that aren't to that elite, master trainer level, have been doing it 10, 15, 20 years and have gone through the ranks, you're just starting out. Say, we have a lot of parents that buy our equipment to use at home. Sure. Now, they're not going to pretend like they're, an elite trainer, but they want to at least get some more education on for themselves to train their kid who's just getting started, may not want to go to a gym, or in this day and age with COVID, they want to kind of stay close to home. Where would you kind of point them to start getting some education on, not necessarily VertiMax, but just regular training in general?
One of the first books that I read 15, 16 years ago, whenever it was a book called Core Performance by Mark Verstegen. And then I think he rewrote that book, and it became Every Day is Game Day. So that was a really, really good book, something that really spoke to me because again, I wasn't the guy that was going to slap myself in the face and take 6 scoops of Jack so I could win the bench press competition. Like, that's just wasn't me. So when I read this book and it was like, wow, there's a better way to train. We don't just have to like eat weights and do bench every single day. Like, wow, this is great. I don't have to do all of this and I can still become a better athlete. So Core Performance or Every Day is Game Day is a great book. A couple of other guys to follow that are out there, like obviously Mike Boyle, Scott Moody, I already mentioned. Eric Cressy's out there. Bob Marito puts out great stuff. We've had some great guests coming into like the VertiMax Summit with Brett Bartholomew, who talks about conscious coaching. We've talked to the lady that did the breathing. I don't know why I can't think of her name right now.
Dana Santis.
Dana Santis. He came. Dan McDonough, another excellent coach. I mean, these are people who have been through it, have made their mistakes, and I've always said that like a smart person learns from their mistakes, a genius learns from other people's mistakes. So I've always tried to learn as much as I can from others' experience, right? Like if you've experienced this and you've done this and like you've paid the price of making mistakes, why would I go and make the same mistakes, right? Let me learn from your mistakes instead of doing the things that are going to maybe lead to trouble or doing things in an inefficient way where I'm banging my head against the wall. And to me, man, that's what education is about. You get to learn from other people's experience and make yourself a genius.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, and a lot of stuff you're talking about is why we decided to go ahead and just have an education platform ourselves. For many years, we were simply an equipment equipment sales company. We had our platform of our VertiMax, the VA, V6, V4, whatever it was. And we gave that to the trainer because there's obviously hundreds of different ways to train, hundreds of different ways to use the equipment. And we kind of just left it to our trainers to use it, our coaches to use it how they wanted to. And then eventually we felt like, hey, it may be better just to have our own pieces of education, our own platforms to help guide some people, especially newer coaches, parents that were starting to use it. And so that's why we decided a few years ago to go ahead and make that call to create it. So now we have 3 different platforms. I mentioned earlier we have our in-person certification, we have our digital training course, and then we have our app. And so you kind of were a big part of all of that happening. So if you could, let's start with the in-person certification class. Can you walk us through what happens on that day?
Yeah, so the in-person is really about, like what you said, we've had these units out there for so long, and sometimes people get into a rut, or they were ordered by a previous coach and now the new coach comes in and they don't necessarily know what it's for, what to do with it. So really what you're going to get out of it is an understanding of the science behind the VertiMax and why it was created, right? Mike telling his story about training the volleyball players and being able to squat a lot, but not translating into a vertical jump or linear speed or anything. So you're going to get a little bit of the science. It can get pretty sciencey, to be honest with you, and don't be afraid of that, because I've been in some of these situations where I'm looking at people's faces as I describe the science, and they're like, "Oh my God, what are we talking about here? What we're talking about force vectors, and like that's not something that I signed up for." And that's not what it's going to be about. We are going to throw that stuff out there because there are people who want that and need that, and it's important to show that this is something that we based off of evidence, right? Like this is not stuff that we just made up and said, I think this works. No, like we proved it. There's experiments, there's science to back this up, there's research to back this up. So you're going to get a lot of that evidence, and then what you're going to do is you're going to get a lot of practical uses of the equipment and the accessories. How do you use the accessories? How do you attach them to yourself or to your clients? How do you set up the equipment so that you can execute drills, number one, safely, and then number two, effectively, right? So that's what you're going to get from the in-person. And then, again, depending on what group you're in, depending on what VertiMax Master Trainer is running that session that day, you're always going to get something that you can use immediately. Like I've always made it something for me, and I know the other guys, and I know M does it too. So when you leave a VertiMax Master Training setting or seminar or whatever it is, you're going to be able to implement something that you learned that next day.
That's cool. So, it's not only just learning, right? It's doing.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Half of that day, for me, I like to break it up because I just know that after lunch, people eat so much that they come in, and if you sit them out in front of presentations, it's just going to be, a snooze fest. So I try to fly through a lot of the information in the slides before lunch. That doesn't mean there's no active portions. Everything, we probably don't sit down for more than an hour. I don't like having anybody sit down for more than an hour because, again, they start to doze off or wander into whatever. So again, like we're teaming up, we're breaking down small groups, and we're showing them how to use the equipment. We're challenging them to see if they can replace a VertiMax drill with a regular drill using some other piece of equipment. And then after lunch, then we come in and it's all practical. We go over linear speed mechanics. We go over multi-directional speed mechanics. We go over vertical jump training. We go over strength training and functional training with the unit. We go over corrective exercise. So there's a lot of different things, and almost 60% of that day is all practical and useful stuff where you're moving through it and experiencing the different exercises and the different things that you can do with VertiMax. Yeah,
that's always such a big, emphasis of what people like about that is actually being in there and attaching the attachments to everybody, going through the actual exercises themselves, learning, seeing what it feels like. Just a lot of positive feedback when it comes to that.
Yeah, for sure.
Now we have a vast variety of clients that purchase VertiMax, from parents to coaches to trainers. Who do you think fits, or who would you recommend attending these classes get the most out of it?
Really, anybody that intends on using VertiMax should absolutely come to one of these courses. And whether you're using VertiMax because it's the only piece of equipment that you have in your garage, or if you're using VertiMax as part of a system in a weight room where you have every other bell and whistle underneath the roof, right? So I think if you intend on using VertiMax for 5 minutes or 50 minutes in your programming, this is something that's going to be helpful because it's going to show you where you can do what you need to do, what it does best, what it can do but doesn't necessarily do in a great way. Because there are things that you can do with VertiMax that, again, if it's the only piece of equipment in your garage, yeah, you should probably use it because it can do this. If you have something else to be able to do like max strength training, you should probably use a barbell if you have access to a barbell, right? Like that's not what I think. One of the things that people look at and say, I've been to trainings. I'll just use my own experience, right? I've been to trainings where it's been a kettlebell training or TRX training or whatever it is, right? And maybe it's the instructor or whatever. Obviously, this is all anecdotal, but I've been to situations where it's like, yeah, this is going to replace everything in your gym. No, that's not what VertiMax is going to do. VertiMax is not going to replace everything that you use currently. But if that's the only piece of equipment that you have, then yeah, for sure, you should be in here and taking a look at some of the different things that it can do.
That's funny. That's a great point. You know, internally here at VertiMax, we kind of laugh at that sometimes because there's some clients that are so passionate about it that feel like, hey, I don't need any other piece of equipment. This is all I need. My athletes are going to play at the best possible. And no, we realize that you need to mix in other pieces of equipment. This isn't a one, solve every problem in the world type of equipment. Obviously, VertiMax can do a lot, but there's other pieces that you need to layer in, and this has to be part, one of the tools in the toolbox, as they say.
Right.
That's cool. Okay, yeah. So yeah, great. The in-person certifications have been going well. I think we're over 1,000 people already now that we've certified worldwide. We have our master trainer team that we're deploying, throughout the U.S. Last year was a little bit of a unique situation with COVID. We didn't do as many certifications, but we have our master trainer team. They're strategically placing workshops or in-person certifications throughout the region wherever we have the demand. A lot of y'all are doing them in your own facility, which is awesome. But we realize that we may be limiting ourselves and the reach that we need to get to, because there's a lot of people that want the VertiMax education, not only here in the U.S. but also abroad. So, we went ahead and moved forward with the virtual class now. And so, similar to the in-person, but obviously it's not the same.
Right.
If you could just kind of quickly give us the differences.
Yeah, with virtual, just like with any type of virtual programming, what you're trying to do is just get some of the basic information out there, right? So like even with me, now with COVID and now with everybody needing something virtually because we can't do in person as much as we would like or as much as we're used to doing, you create these programs and you try to capture as much as you can that you would in person, but you can't. Right. Like even with like on a personal training side, I have personal training clients that I've never met with before, and they get great results. They get great results with the online stuff, digital stuff, but it's not quite the same as when you're coming in person and somebody can watch you and instruct you and teach you what you don't know. Right. And you get to ask questions and, do all those other things. So I think that you're definitely going to be missing the interaction that happens, because there's a lot of interaction that happens in the in-person certification classes, right? There's a lot of questions that are asked and there's a lot of tailoring. We have a set game plan with our curriculum for the day, but that doesn't mean that we don't run off into tangents. I love running off into tangents when people bring up, hey, like I work with this type of clientele, or I work with this type of clientele, or what do you do if this happens, or whatever, right? So that you'll be missed for sure in the virtual class, because in the virtual class, we took our best guess of what is the important information that everybody needs to know. What do they need to know about the accessories? What do they need to know about the science? What do they need to know about setting up drills? And we put it on there. So you're going to get a lot of good information, but that doesn't mean that it replaces kind of what happens at the in-person stuff. Yeah.
That makes sense. I mean, even here on this chat, we had, I think it was a parent with a daughter that had an injured leg, asking specific questions on how she should be training. So obviously we can't dive into every one of those details, but some of those kind of questions can get a little bit more personal when you're actually in person. And then also just some general questions. 3 or 4 people in the class probably are thinking or wondering the same questions. So, you're able to kind of tackle some of those.
Right.
I don't know. Here's the parent. James Jarrett asked,
soccer
daughter fractured her right ankle. What can she do for training? That's probably a pretty detailed, and there's a lot more questions you would have to ask before you could dive into that, but any simple answer.
Whenever I get questions like this, I always have probably a million questions to follow up.
For sure.
How did she fracture her ankle? Has she had a previous ankle fracture? What's going on with the knee? How old is she? What level is she playing on? What's her strength and conditioning program before, right? Like if you had a daughter who wasn't necessarily doing stuff before and then hurt her ankle, now that ankle is compromised. So not only are you introducing something that's new, but it's also compromised, right? So it's going to be difficult for her to learn how to do those things to begin with. And, doing that on an injured ankle is even more so. What I would say though is whenever there's an injury, so let's just go back again to like taking my best guess at this, just like what we do with virtual. Whenever there's an injury, there's a cumulative injury cycle that you want to break, because whether this is the second injury or third or whatever, it's a repetitive thing, or maybe it's the first and you don't want it to become repetitive, you have to break that cumulative injury cycle. So you have trauma, right? That was the fracture of the ankle, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you have some sort of inflammation, you'll see, right? Because your brain naturally sends inflammation to that region to shut down range of motion, because that range of motion is now uncontrollable, right? Your brain deems that uncontrollable, so it says, don't move. Here's some swelling and inflammation so that you don't move, because if you move, you're going to hurt yourself, right? So now what we have to do is we have to let the brain know that it's okay to move again, right? So we have to start restoring some of that normal function, right? And some of that is physiological. You have to wait for the swelling to go down. You have to wait for tissue to heal, or you have to wait for bones to heal. And then once that is healed, we have to open up that brain again and say, hey, look, brain, I know you shut this down, but you got to open it back up because it's okay now, right? Now, once we've opened that back up, now you have to look at what compensations have happened since that injury, right? Because if I fractured my right ankle, now I'm compensating like crazy on the left ankle, right? Exactly. So you have to wait for the tissue trauma or whatever trauma, you have to wait for that to physiologically heal. And then you have to take a look at the biomechanics of, okay, we have to restore the function that was there to begin with. We have to take a look at whatever compensations have developed since then, and then make sure that everything is mobilized and stabilized the way it's supposed to, right? So it would start with making sure that ankle is nice and mobile again, making sure that ankle is nice and stable with single leg balance and pad exercises and all kinds of different things. VertiMax is great for that because we can create different angles of resistance so that you're stabilizing in different planes of movement. And then you start to build strength, and then you start to build speed, and then you start to build explosiveness, right? The last thing that you should do, though, I'll tell you this, no matter what injury it is just because you're cleared to run, don't go run, right? Because everybody gets so caught up in like, oh, when can I run again, right? I tore my ACL, tore my Achilles, I broke my ankle. Just tell me when I can run again. Understand what the role of a doctor is and the PT is and a strength and conditioning coach or biomechanical expert like one of our guys have, right? So your doctor or your surgeon is meant to repair whatever was broken. That's it, right? Like if you go in there, let's say you're a bad driver, right, and you hit a pothole and you bust a tire open, right? Well, you got to go replace the tire, right? So that's what your surgeon does. They just replace the tire, right? Now, if there's something wrong, if you broke something else in the car, now you need like a physical therapist to make sure that everything else is working properly, right? But remember, you're a bad driver. There's a reason why you hit that pothole in the first place, right? So now you need somebody to teach you how to drive, right? So you have to wait for, just because the doctor says, hey, I've replaced the tire is good, doesn't mean, hey, there's other biomechanical issues that are existing that maybe led to the fracture in the first place, that maybe led to an ACL tear. So it's always again difficult too. Like if the nature of the injury, is it an injury that happened non-contact? Is it an injury that happened because somebody kicked you? Because those are actually easier to fix. I can point to a specific event and say this is why your ankle was fractured. Versus I was running in space, I thought I heard something and then it popped. Right? That's scary because now it's like a puzzle that we have to solve.
Yeah, that's cool.
Well, that's a really long answer for what I think is really. Those are never simple questions. Those are never like, "Hey, I fractured my ankle. What should I do?"
Yeah, it's tough.
Variations, yeah.
I knew that was a complex question. Going to be a complex answer to a simple question. What should I do?
Right.
But I appreciate everybody, asking questions, chiming in. Dan McDonough popped in a hey team. I saw Steve Leo in there earlier. IT, like. Appreciate everybody listening and jumping in. And so, hey, let's talk about our third piece of the education puzzle, our app. And so, we've we again spent some time and money into putting together our app. Obviously, there's a very big need for that. So we rolled that out a couple years back. It's been doing great. We're continuously updating that with new content. Our app's available on all the devices. So whether it's an iOS, Android, desktop, all you do is download the app. There's a ton of free content in there, from getting started, what to expect before my equipment arrives, exercise library, and then just some basic, training that's in there. And then there's a premium section, I should say. From there, you get into really detailed information about progressions, programming, sports-specific work. And I know you've had a piece of helping with all that content. So, walk us through, what one of those sports-specific programs involves.
Yeah, so the sports-specific program is really the recipe, right? I think when you come to an in-person certification or virtual certification, really what you're going to do is you're going to get an introduction to the kitchen, and then the app is where you get the recipes, right? So this is how you would train a soccer athlete. This is how you would train a football athlete or a basketball athlete. And this is what the program is going to look like in the preseason, postseason, in season, all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
So we really like, when we decided to do this, we really dove in and we sought out some of the experts in the field, the guys who were doing this at the highest level, the girls who were doing this at the highest level, and said, hey, what do these programs look like? What are the progressions like? So what you will see is, I'm just going to say preseason, for instance, right? What you'll see in a preseason program, which is specific to that sport, you're going to see a progression over 3 months of movement, right? So the movement might start from a crawl all the way up into a vertical jump, and everything is connected, right? It's not just like, hey, we're just going to throw exercises out there that are kind of random and that you can do and then just get harder and harder and harder. No, like the exercises and the progressions are chosen very specifically to help create the results that we want. And that happens from a preseason perspective, in season, and postseason. So really, like if you're a football player or a basketball player, you've got 9 months of training in that app. And everything is systematically broken down and designed so that everything connects. It's not just random stuff. And the other thing that we did is we filmed, I can't even remember how many videos that we filmed, probably over 300, 400 moves. And more than half of those moves, I would say 75% of those moves are not on VertiMax.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So what I would say is, yes, this is a VertiMax app training program. This is a training program for basketball that was created by the VertiMax team. But this is not just how to use VertiMax. So when you take a look at that basketball training program, there's going to be way more on there than just, hey, put on the belt and jump. There's going to be, how do you warm up for it? How do you do some strength training after it? What are some of the conditioning drills that you can do? What are some of the stretches that you need to do to get yourself ready and cool down from the workout? So there's so much more on this app. I almost hate to call it like the VertiMax basketball training, whatever, because people think that, oh, it's just going to be using VertiMax for 45 minutes or an hour. No, and that's not true at all. There's going to be so much more to that than just VertiMax.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. That's why we developed it like this, because we know VertiMax is part of the tools that our trainers and coaches use. So let's feed them what they need and how best to program VertiMax into your programs using all these other pieces of equipment or sometimes no equipment, right? A lot of this is body weight stuff. And, like you mentioned, these were done by top trainers and coaches in the field. Like our basketball program is done by an NBA strength and conditioning coach, right? And then, we started with 4 sports. I think we did football, basketball, soccer, and volleyball. So those are the 4 we rolled out, right?
Yep.
We're going to continuously update that with new programs for those sports, but then also new sports added in. And then at some point here in the near future, we're going to start really diving into a parameter, right? Speed or agility or jump, and kind of program in some workouts specific to how you can implement VertiMax and other tools to help increase those parameters.
Right.
Well, cool, Chris. Well, hey, man, I think we're kind of running to the end here. Looking through some of these last questions, I don't see anything that's really jumping out at me. anybody has anything, you have about 1 more minute to put it in there, and then we'll ask it for you before we break with Chris. But hey, why they might be asking those last minute questions, really appreciate you jumping in here, giving us some of your time. I know it's very valuable. First of the year, everything's kind of getting back ready to.
That's right.
Football, everybody's off season. You got the basketball, combine training coming up. And obviously the spring sports are nearing. So a lot of preseason work with our baseball athletes and softball athletes. So track. Well, appreciate it, man. Again, for anybody that's out there that's not following you, those couple people, let them know how they can find you on social, buddy.
Yeah, so I try to take a look at IG and see what's going on. I will be posting more. I'm going to try to start posting more. My handle on Instagram is Trainer Gorres. It's like personal trainer. So Trainer Gorres. I am on Twitter. I don't tweet a lot, but I just like to be on Twitter to see if there's any news updates, what the latest is on research. There's some handles that I follow on there that are very useful, and I like seeing kind of what they're trying to do or what they're trying to find on the sports science end of things. But yeah, Facebook not Facebook, but Twitter and IG. I don't typically check the Facebook anymore.
You graduated from Facebook?
I do pay attention to it in terms of like the certified VertiMax Master Trainer group, because there'll be some questions in there, and if I can jump in there and answer questions and be a resource for people, that's great. But obviously, maybe it dies down a little bit now after 2020 with the whole Facebook thing. But I've tried to avoid that as much as I could.
Yeah, there'll be some big changes coming up or coming down the pipe here with Facebook and Instagram and some of the other ones. But I know you're pretty active on social, so anybody that's out there, definitely check out Chris's pages. He's got a lot of good content in there, buddy. Well, hey man, I really appreciate it. Thanks for coming on. Thank you all for listening. We're gonna wrap it up today. So go out and have a great day, everybody.
All right, thanks, Al.
Thanks, buddy.